Hello, you're watching the TelecomTV Summit on Private 5G and the Edge. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content. Will the market adoption of private 5G networks be a steady evolution from private LTE or other standards, or will it be more of a revolution? New customers, new use cases, new opportunities? Well, that's the question we want to explore today with the help of our guests. And I am delighted to say that joining me on the programme now are Terje Jensen, SVP of Network Cloud Technology Strategy at Telenor, Sandeep Raithatha, who is Head of Strategy, Innovation and 5G IoT for Virgin Media O2 Business, Shujaur Mufti, Head of Global Partners Solution Architecture, TME and Edge at Red Hat, and Francis Haysom, who is Principal Analyst with Appledore Research. Hello everyone, it's very good to see you all. Thanks so much for taking part in our discussion. Now, it's logical, I guess, to assume that 4G is currently the most popular cellular technology for private networks simply because it's been around for so long. But are there any other reasons why 5G is currently dominating this space? Francis, what are you seeing in the market?
I think it's important almost to step back a little bit from this. We come from a telco perspective, and we see the network as the central objective for what we are trying to achieve. Enterprises, in all their flavors, network is important, but it's not what their primary business outcome is concerning. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in terms of the adoption of 5G is going to be in that area. It's a new technology. It's even a new technology for us as network people, let alone other industries. So we have to recognize that other industries are looking at things that work, are proven to work, have long backstories to them, and to some extent are also devices that may well be cheaper and things like that. So it's not surprising that something like LTE is going to be dominating in the area of cellular, and we can't not discuss private networks and realize that Wi-Fi is still the dominant technology in this area from a perspective of connectivity. So even LTE is a small part of what most enterprises are trying to consume in terms of enterprise. I'll kind of just leave one thing. The thing that will make a difference as to whether 4G is adopted by an enterprise, whether 5G is adopted, is taking the things that network does and applying them to the business problem that the particular enterprise solution needs. And that needs to be what practically drives the majority of the business, not the sort of extreme end of the sort of innovation curve for those industries, because it's the majority business that will drive the adoption of these technologies.
Thanks very much, Francis. And as you say, it's a business drivers we've got to keep our mind on here. And these enterprises are obviously going to be planning to use this equipment for years and years as well. We've got a couple more comments we would like to get here. So first of all, Terje, let me come across to you first.
No, I fully agree with what Francis mentioned. I think private networks are not, of course, deployed by themselves. It's deployed for solving a customer needs. And then, for example, then it's typically triggered by enterprise customers to want to digitalize some of their processes. For example, it could be improving efficiency, improving safety, compliance reporting, or even simply, climate impacts and reducing those. And then, of course, those motivations for the enterprises is then, of course, what kind of devices to connect. I think also Francis mentioned that. And that typically then ends up, okay, so what kind of network should we deploy? So in many cases, there are already 4G devices out there, which are then to be connected. And then, of course, there's no secret that even some of the early IoT devices typically comes with 4G, for example, narrowband IoT or LTM. So that is, there's of course a huge installed base of devices coming from 4G. But of course, it's as also Francis said, everything starts with what is the customer needs. And in our case, we have deployed combination of 4G and 5G. We have couple of 4G private networks and also some 5G only private networks. So it all boils down to what is the customer needs and what are the devices to be there. And then I should also mention that there are in fact also some 2G IoT devices to be connected. So let's not forget about that either. So again, it's all about what is the purpose of the private network, and then of course what kind of devices to connect, and that defines of course what kind of network to be deployed.
Excellent answers. Thanks very much, Terje, for those comments. Sandeep, let's come across to you first about why we're seeing 4G maybe dominating at this moment.
Yeah, I think as the others have said, it all comes down to what is the outcome and what you're trying to achieve. And many of our conversations with our customers, many have a whole range of use cases and ideas that will enable their digital transformation. And then often you start with which one's going to give you the most impact or value. So to bring to life an example of a 4G private network here in the UK, we've deployed a solution for British Sugar, the largest sugar manufacturing organization here in the UK, across 4 sites, providing a 4G private network covering indoor industrial environments and then outdoor campus sites as well. And it's really important to provide that connectivity, really to help start connecting the workers. Getting access to information in real time is a key example. And 4G is a great starting point to do that as well.
Thanks so much, Sandeep. And Shujaur, let's come across to you for comments on this opening question.
Yeah, just to add what Sandeep said, I'll echo the conversation where 4G has been matured. It has been there for a while, but there are some complexities involved with the 5G. But I think if you look into from a platform standpoint, where if you choose the right platform in 4G that provides the capabilities in order to modernize further into 5G, that would actually help set the pace for 5G as well. Because once enterprise set their private 5G network and it has been matured, it's working. There's not a big trend to go back and modernize unless there is a need, there's a use case that has come up that actually requires some of those technologies to be modernized, and especially some of the capabilities that 5G bring in with additional use cases for ultra low sensitivity application, some of the capabilities for application modernization, digital transformation, Sandeep just mentioned, as well as the service creation environment, something that has been far away from 4G private network environments thus far.
Thank you, Shujaur. Thank you, everyone, for those opening comments. Well, I think, as Francis mentioned at the very beginning there, we're only, 4 years or so into the deployment of 5G, really, although it does feel a lot longer. Should we be satisfied with the adoption we're seeing so far of 5G for private networking, or should we be concerned? Is it maybe lagging behind where ideally we'd like to see things? Terje, what's your perspective?
No, that's of course is a good question, and us in the commercial side, of course, we also like to understand. So what are the forecasts? And there have been a lot of forecasts, I think, on the private side or private network side for the last year or so. So in Telenor, we actually defined, I think it was 6-7 years back, we defined a so-called 2-track approach to 5G, where one of the tracks are more this organic or delivering a mobile broadband, and that is basically. What we've seen most of the commercial launches so far on 5G is supporting then mobile broadband to smartphones or fixed wireless access. And then the second track is this, what we call new services, new connectivity, even beyond connectivity, referred to by some, which is then typically from the operator point of view requires us to take new roles. And then we put private network into this, but of course also security, analytics, and so forth. And when we discussed this, as I said, 6-7 years ago, we said that, okay, the first track will be the first one to see commercially as well. And I think we have seen that confirmed in a way that we have passed, for example, 40% now of the smartphones in the Nordic countries are actually 5G enabled smartphones. So we have seen that kind of confirmed as well on the first track. Then on the second track, I think we also expected that to be a bit slower starting and also ramping up a bit slower as well, because it really boils down to what the customers and then of course in the enterprise customers see as the value from doing this, and it has to fit into their upgrades or digitalization or modernization plans anyway. So it could be typically linked to, for example, buying new robots. You want to connect it. It could be even new buildings. I think it was commented earlier as well. It could also be, for example, take a fish farming we have been discussing in some of the other events. It needs to be aligned with typically modernization activities from the enterprises. And that might take a bit more time than it's not simply, putting some devices out there and here you go. It's typically a bigger change in some of the enterprises. And that's also why we expect that actually to take a bit longer time. So not really concerned as of now, but we also see that the pipeline of customer enterprise cases are building up. So it's not like they are nothing. And we also see that the earlier commercial cases we have launched actually works very well as reference cases to the same companies companies in the same industries. So I think it's getting there. So again, not concerned yet, but let's talk again in a year or so.
Terje, hopefully we will absolutely, and see how we're progressing. Sandeep, any concerns from you yet, or is this going pretty much, relatively speaking, as you may have expected?
Yeah, I think for us, it's great to see more and more deployments on 5G. I think one area we all need to work on is building that device ecosystem. And that really requires a real key focus on partnerships, making available testing, and an environment where device manufacturers can test and get these 5G solutions really working well. And a great example of where we've had our first 5G deployment is with a connected hospital with the South London and Maudsley Trust, where we've connected 5G private network. And here we can start to use solutions like augmented reality, connecting workers, IoT smart fridges, and then even technologies like computer vision and AI to monitor spaces and improve the footfall and movement in an environment as well. So I think there's definitely lots of opportunity with 5G. I think it's really key around how we get those devices enabled so we can see that scale.
Thanks, Sandeep. And Francis, as you said earlier, 5G is not only competing against 4G; it's competing against the even larger installed base of Wi-Fi wireless. It's a tough market. This is it progressing? Is it on track? Is it tracking as you may have expected?
I think, to be honest, we should actually be amazed at the amount of 5G in private networks that there is. The reality is, it's not the primary area for an enterprise. And if we look at even within its primary use case today within macro networks, we're still really only touching the surface of what 5G does. And a lot of what is actually being done is really sort of spectrum, a sort of densification of an existing 4G plus, if you like. So I don't think, the new use cases that we've had described for 5G are still, even in the macro network, still a little way in the future. Hopefully they come, and I think they will be a big driver for private enterprises to take up the opportunity there. But I don't think we should be worried at this stage. The bigger worry would be that we're not seeing those 5G use cases starting in the macro networks. Then we do really have a problem because we're not really differentiating it from LTE, apart from in terms of additional spectrum and densification.
Thanks, Francis. So no worries there, but I'm worried about an aspect of private 5G because at the moment it appears that we're hearing about so many large-scale deployments and use cases. The majority of the private 5G deployments that have been announced so far are in these environments like ports, stadia, large factories. We've heard a lot of these already during today's discussion, and I must be honest, it concerns me a little. Sandeep, what do you think? Is this going to be a limitation on what the private 5G market can achieve?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's anything to be too concerned about. Of course, you're seeing, as you said, those manufacturing organizations, those transport hubs, logistic warehouses really leading the way, deploying private networks, really looking at how they can drive operational efficiency, looking at how their employees can be connected consistently with that extremely reliable connectivity that private networks can bring. And really, if you think about those large environments, they really benefit from having those private networks, especially with outdoor coverage, campus-wide solutions. That's where 5G macro networks can really come to play and provide that right coverage for those use cases and give you that reliability. I think what we'll start to see is, those solutions becoming much more repeatable and more easily able to be repeated and then scaled across a number of industries that will then start to benefit and reduce that barrier that's probably there today. It requires often an investment, right, to deploy a mini mobile network on your site, and it's how do you get to that point of making it easy and repeatable and making it much more attainable for a larger base of customers. And I think it'll be interesting to see as you get new technologies like hybrid and hosted private networks, which start to move some of those components away from the customer premise and into the cloud, that will try to drive a different behavior and probably more scale as well.
Yeah, I see what you mean there, Sandeep, and I hope we will see that. Terje, what are your thoughts on this? Because as Sandeep said, it does require an investment, and we use a lot of our resources. There's big teams involved in going to on a case by case basis.
No, I think from Telenor side, we actually would like to talk about my private network experience more. Meaning that you can deliver that in at least two ways. One way, of course, is on campus. You have more or less at least a radio and maybe a full-blown mobile core, even an edge cloud on campus. And then you have the other way, which is more like similar to a slice or even a pre-slice, where you actually deliver a private network experience from the public network. So that is the wide area public network. So we are delivering both. So we have a bit of insight, into how these cases are constructing, and there is no so far it of course seems that the customer, if you want to really defend or argue for an on-campus solution, either you have to have the very strict requirement of autonomy, meaning that your campus or building or whatever should be independent of the rest of the world. And there we have some cases, for example, in the hospital the environment, which really want to run their hospital independently of what's happening out there. So that's one of the arguments. Or it needs to be justified by a certain size. And even a size, we can argue whether this on campus is more effective or efficient than the private or the public network. I'm not really surprised that you need a certain size in order to justify this on campus part of it. What we have delivered, of course, we also have delivered, like, for example, harbor cases. We have delivered some airport cases, mining tunnels, and so forth, where we are doing we'll call it a pre-slice in a way from the public network. So it's fully doable to do it in that way as well. So, but of course, when we're talking about offshore oil platforms and so on, it tends to be, installations and investments on the sites. And of course, as I mentioned, also the hospital case there with autonomy. So it's a mix of both, I think, is to say. And I think we're also going to see a development in the enterprises on what's their preference and what are their requirements going forward.
Yeah, thanks very much, Terje. And I like the focus on the experience as well. Maybe we need to sort of reapproach what we're actually offering here. It's not so much the hardware, the network, it's the services, it's the applications, it's what comes after this. Shujaur, let's come across to you for comments first, then we'll go and talk to Francis.
Okay, so just to add to what Terje and Sandeep mentioned about the private networks, because from Red Hat standpoint, we are seeing a lot of customers are coming to us where they have, in broader use cases, they have further drill down cases where, for example, they wanted to deploy somewhere on the ship, which is like traveling in the sea for about a year and not coming back, right? Some of those deployments where we have air gap deployment where there is no connectivity for a big amount of time, right? So some of those areas where within the broader use cases, some additional requirements that are coming up, and we are seeing that as the technology is evolving between 4G and 5G, where 5G is able to carry a bit more burden along with the openness that it brings in the architecture, where it further divides on the radio network a bit, where you can have some part of the network deployed closer to the edge, to the premises, while you could still maintain the centralized control over in the private cloud or the public cloud. So some of those areas we are seeing are growing. Enterprise customers are asking some of those requirements. They're asking some of those questions. There are cases where they are looking to migrate. The initial deployment has been mainly on the appliance-based systems. Now they're looking to migrate and modernize their platform along with 5G, which can provide both cloud native and openness in the architecture that can further help them in enabling additional or you can say the deep requirements within those broader use cases.
Thanks, Shujaur. And as you just said there, it's so important that we actually do listen to what these enterprise customers actually want and what their needs are, react to that. Francis, I promised to come over and get some more thoughts from you. Any concerns from you about some of these use cases we're seeing at the moment and deployments?
Honestly, I'm not surprised at the use cases that we're seeing at the moment. They're probably the closest use cases in a private environment to those that are being deployed for 5G in terms of a macro network. So we shouldn't really be surprised that they are large scale. They're the things they're wanting mobility. They're wanting large areas. They're wanting elements of beamforming. So that we shouldn't be surprised about that one. I think the challenge and the opportunity, both the challenge and the opportunity in this area, and where we can stop being worried about it, is all the other use cases tend to be a little bit more niche, tend to be inside buildings or remote or IoT devices. And a lot of the challenges there are about scaling down the solution. So 5G and 4G to a large extent have always been big scale, wide country technologies that have, where the primary focus of all of the research and development has been on deploying in a wide country. Our opportunity is, how do we scale that down? How do we increase the amount of autonomy in a network that makes it a compatible and easy to use solution for an enterprise? And the second opportunity for us is, how do we make that base technology that is scaled down for the as easily exposed to the enterprise, such that they can develop their own ideas in the area, that they can develop their with their partners specific business outcomes that they're wanting. If we can solve those two things, we shouldn't be worried. If we can't solve those two things, we definitely should be.
Thanks, Francis. I'm sure we're going to see some as-a-service type solutions and some creative ideas coming along very, very soon. I've got a couple of scenarios here I'd like to put to you all, enterprise customer scenarios. Let's look at the first one, and that is an enterprise that's planning a private cellular deployment but doesn't have an existing one. Perhaps it has Wi-Fi, but it certainly doesn't have cellular. For a scenario like that, why should they be choosing 5G for a private network? What's our pitch for 5G? And Shujaur, let's start with you if you can.
Yeah, so I will start with high level. I would say look at the use case. If it has high bandwidth and low latency requirement, right? So that would be the first thing to look at it. If these two criteria are met, where they wanted to have a high data rate, at the same time they have the application that actually require a very low sensitivity, right? They're ultra low sensitivity application. If these two criteria are met, that means they are the candidate for 5G. And of course, mobility and other factors can be addressed with 4G. But I think these are two key criteria for 5G. And further add to that, from looking ahead standpoint, where 5G advanced, and of course at some point the 6G will also come in play as well. I think looking into app development as well as the service creation environment. So some of those capabilities, if they wanted to continue on the path where they wanted to add up the AI and ML type use cases, and they wanted some sort of environment or a platform that actually help enable further modernize their application, as well as with the ability to create new services, dynamic services ad hoc. Some of those things are actually available as a part of 5G architecture, where in 5G MAC, you could actually have to deploy UPF at the edge, which can provide you a very fast data rate and low latency. At the same time, with opening up this open RAN architecture, where you have the ability to deploy CUDU, you could actually have the ability to further modernize your platform and open up for application development, service creation, and modernization of your network.
Great. So what I'm really hearing there is it's about the needs again, isn't it? It's about the needs of the enterprise, what their application needs are, service needs are. We'll come to Terje in a second, but Francis, your thoughts on our pitch for why a private 5G network?
I think a couple of things here. The first is really 5G is the first G that gives you a fully software network, and that gives opportunities to developers and system integrators in the particular enterprise that can characterize the network in a way that is very specific for that enterprise. So there's that fundamentally cloud-based architecture that allows you to build more than just the network build your capability into that network for a specific area. And as was mentioned, I think Open RAN is also an important part here. Is we look at the macro networks. Macro networks are built for a lot of use cases, generally people moving around with phones, for example, and the way things move, IoT devices or whatever, is very different. And we may want, again, the enterprise may wish to characterize their network in a way that is specific for their needs. For example, a mine does not need handover parameters for a 200 km/h train, for example. So there may be a whole load of things to do with energy management, efficiency that could be brought out in this area where 5G and its software platform can enable things that the sort of, I guess, the one flavor of LTE can't.
Thanks very much, Francis. And Terje, your thoughts on this scenario of an enterprise that hasn't yet got a private cellular network? Why should it go straight in with a 5G network?
No, I can be probably quick and not to repeat what the two gentlemen just said before. But what we have seen in many of these use cases is that as soon as you have quite a number of high-definition video camera feeds to be forwarded to a central site or to on-campus processing, for example, that tend to drive the capacity for a certain area. And then, of course, it's not only 4G and 5G, but there's also a discussion about how much spectrum do you have. And typically, in C-band, for example, 5G has a broader spectrum. So in that sense, it's a higher capacity actually to connect more cameras to within a site. For example, say a harbor case, for example, where we have done this. And then, of course, there's another argument I think is also mentioned earlier, is that latency and the stable latency. For example, for remote controlling vehicles, what we are doing, for example, for a mining case where people are actually sitting in the office and driving this heavy machinery, then they want to have stable latency. So that's a kind of an important part, where 5G is actually delivering lower latency than 4G. And the same thing we have seen when we discuss about utilities and power distribution, for example. We need to go to 5G actually to meet the requirements. Where they have to both detect if there is something happening on the power distribution and also start rerouting energy. And if they're not able to meet the requirements they actually have, they need to shut down the distribution. So 5G was the technology there to actually meet those requirements. Then just a final argument, I think, just coming back from Barcelona as well. Everyone talked about climate, and in fact, 5G is more energy efficient. If you manage to fill up the capacity there, so there's also a reduction of the climate impacts using 5G compared to earlier generations.
Fantastic. Well, there's a lot of arguments there about why enterprises should adopt 5G for their private networks. What about the next scenario then? The next scenario is a company that already has an LTE-based 4G private network. Is there a compelling case for them to upgrade to a 5G network? And Francis, let me come across, and please, if I can, start with you.
I hope there is, but I would say we'll come back to the earlier comments right at the beginning. It has to be business case, business outcome driven as to why the 5G. The problem today, I think, for somebody that has already deployed a 4G network is if you strip out the use cases that are already supported by Wi-Fi and you strip out the use cases that are already delivered by 4G, particularly in terms of mobility, for example, the set of use cases that is left within a typical enterprise is quite small. Yes, there are new use cases like AR and VR applications that may drive very niche areas in that area. but it is going to be, you're only really going to deploy a new network if that small set of use cases, either with low latency needs, huge IoT perspective video, for example, actually drives the sort of upgrade cost from going from a 4G network to a 5G network. And coming back to a scaling thing, and we've seen this with macro networks for operators, the more that can be made by solution providers that enables that upgrade path to be cheaper, better, easier, that is the thing that's going to drive the ability to make the upgrade path to 5G.
Yeah, good points. I'm not quite certain I'm seeing this easy upgrade path yet. So that's something to really focus on. Sandeep, can we come across to you for comments on this one, please?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's, as we said, it's all about the use cases. And once you've got your 4G network up and running, depending on where you are on your digital transformation, if you've got your things, your devices connected, and then you really want to start to get into more advanced, some of the advanced use cases, getting into robotics, digital twins, computer vision, machine vision. That's where I think you'll start to see the end of where you can take your 4G private network. And as you can start to see some of those business benefits that will drive that uptake and that investment in 5G. So I think it's really important, maximize what you have with the 4G private network. But then as you're ready to adopt and see that next stage of your company's transformation with some of the advanced use cases, more automation, better operational efficiency, that's when you can start to make that switch and start with one of those big use cases like AGV robotics or computer machine vision. I think would be one of those drivers that will then get you onto the 5G private network.
Oh yes, thanks very much, Sandeep, for those comments. Well, we've just got time for one quick question, so let's get some quick answers if we can. If we come back to the title of this discussion, is the move from private 4G to private 5G going to be an evolutionary one, such as like end-of-life replacement or changing use cases, or as we've just heard, you've got a new application in your enterprise, so you need to support that? Or will it be more revolutionary, where the improvements in benefits is so great that a swap out is just common sense? It's a no-brainer. Terje, let me start with you. I know it's a bit tricky. We've heard a lot of things so far in this discussion, but is it evolutionary or is it revolutionary?
Maybe I'm going to disappoint you a bit. I think it will be both actually. But I think the purpose of this discussion is maybe, or what the customer, they don't want to be surprised, I guess. So it should be planned. And then it could be planned like a massive or a replacement, or it could be planned like an evolution. I think at least in a lot of the customer dialogues we have, is good that we have a starting point and we have an upgrade path. So in that case, it will be an evolution. Evolution in terms of supporting more use cases, supporting more devices, and so forth. So a lot of the customers are, when they are embarking on this journey, actually would like to see it as an evolution. So it's not like a dead end, and then they have to do a massive change. But I think I think this should be planned. So it's to avoid what surprises. And it's also come back to what I think I mentioned earlier as well. We actually see private networks as they could be deployed in two ways. Either it's on campus or it could be delivered as part of the wide area networks. And of course, if it's delivered by the wide area networks, it will be an evolution, because that will be upgraded according to new releases and new functionalities and so on. So that's one way to to stay on the evolution path. But of course, if the enterprises are planning for a massive upgrade of robots or those fish farming cases, for example, those are multi-million euro installations. So that there are a lot of money goes there, and then of course they could discussing 4G and 5G just is a small peanut, compared to that investment. But at the end, it's probably a combination of both. But let's make it planned, so it will not be surprises.
Terje, that's my perfect answer, as always, is it depends. It depends on the customer, it depends on the use case, it depends on the situation. Absolutely perfect. Of course it does. It always does. Look, we're out of time. Thank you all very much indeed for taking part in our discussion today and sharing all of your views. And if you're watching this on day one of our private 5G and the Edge Summit, then please send us your questions and we will answer them in our live Q&A show, which is coming up soon. And don't forget to view the other panel discussions and keynote interviews we have in this year's summit. For now though, thanks for watching and goodbye.